Thanks for joining me, Megan. How's everything going?
It's going really well. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing right now, and then we'll jump into a little bit of your story and how maybe you felt imposter syndrome before.
Okay. Well, I'm Megan. I am currently a student at Lambda School. Right now, I am in the project manager program and working as a TA, teacher's assistant. And so it's actually been a very rewarding process in many different ways. So it's definitely helped me out in more ways than I could have thought in my life. So
Just
it's a
the
blessing.
program manager part in general, or both being a program manager and a TA?
Both actually. Each one has its own perks that have helped me out personally.
Awesome.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think the old adage of if you can teach something, or teaching is the best way to learn.
It
So,
really is.
and you take on that role, especially as a TA, because you're teaching guided projects every morning, but also as a PM, working one on one with students,
Hmm.
um, teaching those principles one on one. Awesome. So we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome, hopefully to help Lambda students who are facing imposter syndrome through the class as they're going through the job search, and then even when they get into their careers, imposter syndrome doesn't go away. So
No.
can you tell us a little bit, how when have you felt imposter syndrome before? What experience do you have with that?
Oh, I have quite a bit of it actually. I've experienced it at nearly every single kind of point in my life. I didn't know what it was, in all honesty, until a few months ago when I encountered it majorly through when I was going through one of the portions for React. Actually, is what really heightened my imposter syndrome.
Yeah. How did that come upon you? What do you experience when you're feeling imposter syndrome?
So when I'm feeling it, it's almost as if my brain shuts down. I feel, even though I can see that I've done the work and I hear someone tell me that I'm doing it correctly, my imposter syndrome will kick in and I almost explain it as going stupid, to where I
Hmm.
nearly my brain blanks out and I go, I really don't know how to do this. And so it puts me on that track that sends me down deeper and I go, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And that's when you start questioning everything that you've done up to that point and you go, well, how did I make it this far? And I I had a very massive mental breakdown
Wow.
that I pushed through.
And you think that came upon because of imposter syndrome?
Yes. Yeah, it was because of imposter syndrome. I had actually been struggling with it for a couple of weeks before that.
Hmm.
And since I wasn't very well educated on the topic or didn't really understand what I was experiencing, I let myself fall into that imposter syndrome hole.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so tough.
Yeah.
Um, and that's an interesting way to put it, that you feel like you almost kind of go into this spiral of, I mean, your brain almost blocks you from
Mhm.
progressing, and says, you kind of tell yourself, no, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, this isn't me accomplishing these things.
Yeah. And then even though your mind knows that you know what to do, it puts that wall up where it's like, you know what, you're telling yourself you can't, so I'm not going to let you.
Yeah, yeah, that's so rough. Sorry you had to go through that.
I'm actually glad I went through it though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me strength. It taught me how to, pull yourself up out of that so that if
Mhm.
I ever do encounter it again, I know what to do in order to help myself.
Yeah, and you know that you have the strength to get past it.
Exactly.
Yeah. What do you think, how would you feel right now, looking back at that situation, how would you
Mhm.
feel right now? Or I mean, how do you think you would feel at this point if you had quit? If you had let that get to you and let that drive you away from what you were trying to accomplish?
I would feel awful. Um, I would probably have, thought to myself, I just wasted so many months and things like that. And then I wouldn't have realized what I can actually accomplish. And
Yeah.
so, I think that fighting spirit that I have deep down was like, nope, you're not quitting. You're not doing it. You're in it for the long run. You found something that you enjoy doing, stick with it, push through it. I kept telling myself at one point, I was like, you know what? This is hard, but it's hard. It's hard for a reason, because if it was easy, everybody could do it. So I was like, I've got to fight through it. I've got to push through it. I've already made it this far. So just keep pushing.
Yeah, I love that. It's hard for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you know that it really does kind of put up a barrier to entering into the tech, into a tech career, into a career as a programmer. And really it's part of the reason that programmers get paid so much, because it really is very difficult to do. Was there ever a point that you were close to quitting?
Yes.
And what was that experience like?
Um, that experience it was a very enlightening experience, I can say at this point. At the time, that experience was more like I turned off all the lights in my house. I shut down my computer, turned off TVs. I unplugged nearly anything electronic in my house. And I was just like, you know what? I need just white refrigerator noise. And I was like, I can't, see the glow of a screen, that kind of thing. That's how bad I actually went down in that hole. And I was like, I can't even see a glow of my phone screen. I turned off my phone, everything. I was like, I'm away from technology for, I think I disconnected from technology for 4 hours that day,
Wow.
just to kind of mentally restart.
Yeah.
And then as I started powering everything back on, I finally got to my laptop and I was like, you're not a quitter. You don't give up. I opened that laptop, powered it back on, and I started coding again. It was almost like instant, where I was like, you know what? You can do this. You're not a quitter, and you've made it this far. So let's show people what you can do.
That's so awesome.
I ended up doing something probably I don't recommend anybody doing, but I busted out one of the old Lambda week-long project week projects in a night.
Wow.
Just because it was during build week that this happened. And so I was like, I didn't want to go to my morning stand up and not have anything to show. Because I
Yeah.
hadn't gotten any work. I was very frustrated with my project. And I was like, I need to do something that feels like fun, something that doesn't feel like it's work right now. So
Yes.
I did that, busted it out, got it working, and I was like, oh my gosh, I really do know this. So that's actually what really restarted me. It kind of made me like, you've got this. Look what you did. Once you're done with everything, go take a nap.
Push through and then you can sleep.
Yes, push through, then take a nap.
So do you think at that point, was it more of a mental decision that got you past the imposter syndrome, or was it seeing the accomplishment after you were able to, like, as you were building that night, were you
Mm-hmm.
still feeling that, but then that more went away at the end, or was it at the beginning when you said, I can do this, that those feelings went away?
So the feelings fully they started to slowly decrease. The further I got through, they started to decrease. Some of the stuff at the beginning of the app for me to build, it was simple. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to do the hard stuff now. I was like, I'm going to get my delete working, this update working. I'm going to get it done. And I was like, okay, I know this is one of my weaker points. So I kept telling myself in my brain, I was like, you've got this. Look at what you've already built. So I kept just telling myself that. And I was like, I made it through it. Made it through it. I went to bed. I messaged my PM first thing in the morning. I was like, okay, I had to do a little retribution for myself, but I want to show you what I did. Just because I felt pride at that point.
Yeah.
Just because it was a double pride of, I've got the pride that I built this, but I have the pride that I got past my mental block. That imposter syndrome, I basically broke through that wall.
That's so awesome. I mean, that is like night and day difference from what you were feeling the day before.
Yeah.
Heavy imposter syndrome to the point that you couldn't even have electricity on in your home.
Yeah.
To being so proud of what you had accomplished and built that you had to go share it with someone.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
It felt really good. It was probably about halfway through the build where I was like, why did I freak out? So I started getting those questions of, why did I let this happen? How did I let it happen? I started asking myself that. And so afterwards, I started actually researching a lot on imposter syndrome, just for my own personal benefit.
Okay, wait. To me, it sounds like you kind of gave your imposter syndrome its own dose of imposter syndrome.
Yes. I was like, you know what? You're going to do this to me, so I'm going to do this to you. I'm going to really fight you. You know, I researched, what other people have done to get past it. Mm-hmm. And some of the things that I researched, I was like, okay, the way that I went through it was not the best way to battle it. And I was like, I did something.
Real quick, what was that way? What are you referring to?
That quick and instant, kind of like the force myself to do something.
Oh, okay.
In a quick and instant way versus do a gradual grow out of it.
Okay. Gotcha.
But I felt like I didn't have the time for the gradual grow.
Yeah. Lambda moves too fast sometimes for that.
It's too fast for that gradual grow, even though I'm still gradually growing to this day.
Yeah. Maybe it's less of maybe there it is kind of a gradual growing out of it, but there has to come a point that you have that mental switch.
Yes.
And I think some people will have to take that, and it will be a defining moment, a point in time that they can say, this is when it changed. And I think there's going to be some people that maybe it is more, that defining moment is more spread out over time and more gradual. But yeah, I think you're right. Once you make that mental switch, whether it's instantaneous or over a period of time, it's not over.
No.
The imposter syndrome will be there through the rest of your time at Lambda, through your first couple of jobs, and pause. There we go. And it's still going to affect you through your career.
Oh, yeah.
What are you doing now to continue to battle that? And what advice would you give to those that are maybe facing that kind of downward spiral that you went through?
The biggest thing that I've actually done and been doing was doing the PM.
Oh, cool.
Doing the time as the PM. It's actually helped me not be as close to the edge with imposter syndrome. It's gradually gotten me further and further away from it within some of this time that I've had. Because I can focus on someone else instead of just myself. I can focus on, okay, I see this student that is in my PM group. I see that they're struggling. Let me reach out, see what's going on, and see what we can do. So it gives me that, checks and balances where I'm like having to keep up with myself, but at the same time, I'm also focusing elsewhere to make sure that if I notice the signs that I went through, I can be there to go ahead and have someone be like, okay, these resources were great for me. Let me see if we can get you in contact.
Awesome. That's really cool. And I think there's a couple points to that. One thing that I've read quite a bit about imposter syndrome is that reaching out to others
Mm-hmm.
and helping others through similar problems is actually a really good way to combat imposter syndrome. And I think it's on a couple different levels. Number one, I think when you're doing that, it brings good feelings to you and helps you kind of pull out of that negative track that you've been going down. But I think also it's important to look at people around you and realize that they're struggling with the same thing. And once you see that in other people around you and your peers, even those that you really look up to that may be bringing on the imposter syndrome, when you see their struggles, you realize, hey, everybody around me is struggling with the same stuff. It's okay that I'm struggling. It's okay that this is difficult for me. It doesn't mean that I shouldn't be here. It just means that this is hard, and everybody's going to have their own struggles through it. So I think that's a great point that you brought up. Sorry, go ahead.
I actually did a similar exercise just like that in one of my stand-up meetings.
Oh, cool.
It was during the second week of React. A lot of the students were very down. So I was like, you know what, let's talk about imposter syndrome. And I told a little bit about what I've gone through, and then they just started opening up. Every single student was saying the exact same thing. They were all looking around like, okay, so everybody's in the same boat as me. And so it was very enlightening to see everybody understand that their struggles were the same ones as, someone else was having, and that me trying to push them to either work together or something was for a reason.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really cool exercise. I think we should start incorporating that more in our PM groups.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really good enlightening exercise, especially for a tough week. Mm-hmm. It's really hard when you're doing those stand-up meetings and you see the students and they're just looking down. Yeah. Their face is like, they don't have that excitement. Like sometimes I would come to stand-up being like, oh, it's excitement. It's the end of the day. After this, I get to eat some dinner, relax a little bit, that kind of stuff. But I just saw blank, empty stares coming back at me. And I was like, we're not talking about your day, how they want to talk about it. We're not talking about their code. We're talking about, we're doing some feelings today.
Cool.
And yeah, it was definitely helpful. I will say student success was also a very big help with me. Mm-hmm. I actually had daily meetings with Jasmine for about a week and a half to 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Just to check in on me, make sure I'm doing okay, and that helped me out quite a bit as well.
Yeah. Another thing I do personally, and that I've read quite a bit on, is having someone to talk to.
Yes.
Someone to share those feelings with.
Mm-hmm.
So real quick, I don't know why it keeps doing that. Good thing I can edit this. Okay, there we go. So real quick, what would you say to someone who is kind of hitting that low point or kind of heading in that direction because of imposter syndrome? What advice would you give that student?
So the best advice that I would give them would be to kind of step away for 20 minutes. Take a good long 20-minute break. I would tell them, completely away from your computer. I want you to get fully away from your workspace where you're currently working. Go to another room of your house, go outside, take a 20-minute walk. Do something and remove yourself fully from that kind of area. Mm-hmm. Just because if you sit and kind of fester, even if you move the laptop out of the way, you're still in that area.
Yeah.
And with me, it's all about, cleansing of, kind of like cleansing the air, making sure that, you've got, basically, if you go outside and go for a walk, you're opening the door, the fresh air is coming in the house, you're letting some of your bad energy out of the house. So kind of not sitting in a bad energy area. You know, I tell people completely remove yourself from where you're at. You know, I've told students, even because I had a student who was very close to my point, told my student, I said, don't even message me on Slack until you have been away for 20 minutes. I said, I want to see your active icon go to away for at least 20 minutes. And then we'll revisit what's going on.
Awesome. What do you think that does to help them?
I think what it does is kind of helps you reset your brain in a sense, to where, you know, if you're stuck on an issue or a problem, your brain's just going to keep going in that same roundabout train, almost just like a dog chasing its tail. It's just going to keep going in a circle until either you've just completely had it and you want to break your computer or something, or you know, you might get that light bulb, but if it's been for so long, you're not going to get that clarity after so long of struggling with it.
Yeah, and I think the imposter syndrome sets in and makes things even foggier.
Yes.
Blocks your vision, your mental ability to push through that problem even more. And so maybe stepping away from that situation clears your mind and helps clear out some of that imposter syndrome that might be creeping in at that point.
Yeah, especially if you can get to it early, then that can really help that imposter syndrome from creeping in strong. You know, I kind of envision imposter syndrome as like vines kind of going in from a tree and just grabbing on to something and being like, I'm not letting go once it starts to grow around it. So
interesting. That's a good analogy. That's a really good visual. I feel like it's wrapping around you and gets to a point of almost suffocating you. Yeah. One last thing I want to talk about is as you have started this journey into the tech world, as a woman, do you feel like that adds more to the imposter syndrome as you come into a male dominant profession?
You know, a little bit. You know, just because coming in as a woman, you know, other women see you come in and they start like heavily rooting for you. You know, and it almost gets to that point where, you know, if you're struggling with something, you don't want to seem embarrassed and ask another woman about it, because she might be like, oh, you're not good enough to do this. And then you get another point, you get scared to ask a man about it because he's going to be like, see, this is why women shouldn't be in tech, or something of that nature.
Yeah.
So those thoughts get a lot heavier when the deeper imposter syndrome really sets in. Those thoughts get 10 times heavier. At first, you know, you're hesitant, but the deeper it gets, the more those thoughts come up, and you're like, so they're all going to judge me and be like, either basically everyone's going to say I don't belong. The
pure definition of imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Oh yeah, pure definition.
Go ahead.
Which is kind of hard to find a pure definition of it online, by the way.
It is. You're right. It is. And I think that's because it affects people in different ways. And it's important to note that these are just thoughts in your mind. This isn't experiences you've had, right? These are just what you've thought about it, but like when you reach out to someone, then your experience is different.
Yeah. You know, it's just kind of things that I thought. Once I did reach out, you know, those thoughts completely went away. None of what I thought would happen did. And so it's just kind of like those initial thoughts that sink in where you're like, oh, I need help. What's someone going to say? And then you get that nervousness where you hover over the keyboard for a minute where you're like, what do I say? Yeah. And how do I say it to come off in a almost educated sense? It's actually something I've tried to get across to a lot of my students when asking for help. I tell them, don't say just I need help. I was like, if you don't really know what you need help with, jazz it up, make it smart, be like, hey, I'm stuck on something. I'm not really sure what I need to do. Can someone help me out? I
Hmm.
said, usually you reach out like that and no one's going to say a bad word about you whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, there are people out there that will
Mm-hmm.
look down on you. Through
Oh,
my
yeah.
entire career, I've only met one person like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Luckily, everybody else that I've worked with in my entire career have been so helpful, so willing to open up and help. And I've never faced anybody else that's been judgmental in the least. And it's
Yeah.
so cool. I think just as human beings, that's our nature. We want to help other people. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's really in our own minds that we're blocking ourselves from reaching out and asking for help.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
It definitely is.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Oh,
And
thank you.
um, is there any last thing you want to say to those that will watch this video in the future?
Yeah, don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid if you feel that imposter syndrome, because you will feel it at some point. And just basically learn how you operate and learn the best way for you to get past it.